Welcome to the Come Up Starter Kit, guys. My name is Shankar, and I have a wonderful guest with me today, Rose Naughton, who specialises in program delivery. Thank you, Rose, for jumping on board.
Thank you, Shankar. I'm really pleased to be able to be involved in your wonderful podcast.
No, not a problem. Now, Rose, I wanted to share your lovely story. I know that I've known you for some time, and you definitely have had some exciting times within your career, and I think you've got a lot of information to share. I'm going to jump into it and ask, what has been your golden nuggets to staying sane during these lockdowns?
Well, I think what I do is focus on what I can do with my work, my team, my family and the community. I think you just got to deal with what you can change and be aware of what you can't change. And as we move on in this whole pandemic, there's probably things we might say that we don't want to change and go back to how it was. So I'm very much aware of continuing to evolve in my life and as a professional, and also, with the people around me. I think it's really important to be patient and to engage with the present with an eye on the horizon. And I think I've always been like that. And I have this old saying, and I've got to try and remember it. It's about 90 years old now, and it used to be a prayer. But I mean, it is a prayer, but it still resonates with me. And it's about accepting the things you can change and having the courage to change the things you can, but also the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah. And I think that's really important right now. There's just things we can't change. And so this is the life we're living, and this is the thing we're in, and we just got to live through it. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's some really good advice as well. I think it's going to be we're definitely in interesting times, and what is ahead of us, we don't know, but I guess being able to change what we can control is the best thing. I think that's 100% spot on. I wanted to give the audience a bit of a background because you have had such a colourful career, and I really wanted to share that with everyone. Maybe if you wanted to give us a rundown where it all started and where you are at the moment.
Okay. So I'm going to go right back because I think it is a bit of an essence of me, okay? Yeah. So when I look at my very first job, I think it is a reflection of what drives me or how I got it. And that what I mean is I'm a person that sort of says, what if I do this? Or let's see what happens, and then take a leap of faith. So I am from Western Australia, and I'm a country girl from the wheat belt, okay? So I live in town. The wheat belt is sort of like, east of Perth, anyway. So I was 14, so I'm going way back. Right. But this is important. I was 14, and, I was nearly 15, and I lived in this country town, and I sort of had a bit of a choice. Maybe I could get a job at Coles behind the lolly counter. And I thought, I don't really want to do that. I was watching television, and there was an ad on, and it was for the modern gift shops. It was really, gift shopping in Perth, right. Quite a distance away in Barrack Street, Perth, the modern gift shop. So I wrote a letter to Mr. Wise, and I just said, look, I really think I could come and work for you, right. For 3 months on the summer break. And I didn't even think that I would get it because I'm a country kid. Right. And, I thought all the city kids would be lining up for that. But you know what? I got it.
Yeah, right.
And so I became a shop assistant, and I learned all about jewellery, cleaning jewellery, doing lots of things with jewellery. Right. I can't remember any of that now. So Mr. Wise then came to me, towards the end and said, we'd really like you to stay. And I thought, thank you, but I want to finish school. So I thought, well, I was from a family that education, didn't go much beyond year 10. Okay. And I'm one of 6 children. And out of those 6 children, I was the only one who went on to university from school. My sister went later on. So it was pretty important then, like, because it was decisions to make, back then, that I wanted that. But as soon as I finished school, I got the first train out of there and went to the city.
Right. And how was that experience, leaving the country town, going into the city?
Well, I've lived, when you do that, what do they say? How many homes have you lived in, in your life? I started counting up. Oh my God, there's so many, well over 35 probably.
Right.
But that's interesting, just, when you're young and then you can live somewhere for a long time and other things actually happen. But I did live with my grandparents for a while.
Right.
But I was bonded to the education department, so I became a teacher, during that time. But I had lots of different jobs. I worked for a politician in his office. I looked after children, for this guy who ran a whole lot of big exercise guru in Perth. So a whole range of things. And then, I started my teaching degree, my teaching post, where I was teaching English, theatre arts, drama, things like that. But I've always had interest, you see, so I've had businesses too.
Yes.
So when I was I was reasonably early 20s, I actually got a news agency and ran a news agency.
Really?
So that was juggling that and a couple of little kids. So I did that, and then I decided it was a bit hard. So I went, like, in terms of juggling all the children's needs.
Right.
So I actually then went back to teaching full time.
Okay.
I made a decision in my career, and you can tell when I start talking probably that it was breadth over, just depth in one place.
Right.
So whether it was in my teaching career, I made sure I taught in Catholic schools, government schools, independent schools. So I did all of that. And, during all of that time, I was, coordinator, become a head of English, become a deputy school principal. And then I thought, what's now? So I was thinking, do I want to be a school principal? And I thought, no, I don't really want to be a school principal. And
any reason why you didn't want to be a principal?
I felt like that. Yeah, I also feel like I'm a person who, likes to doesn't necessarily need to be the figurehead, that type of thing. But I was, when I was a deputy school principal, I was very concerned, because I used to run all the curriculum, and I was concerned about the students, not having flexible pathways. So I got really passionate about flexible pathways for young people.
Yeah, right.
They were sort of funneled in, these are the kids who can and these are the kids who can't, So I did another thing a little bit like Mr. Wise, and there was a job going, and I thought, there's no way you're going to get that job, Rose. You're from an independent school, and, it's all big stuff. So anyway, I applied for this job to lead this senior secondary reform, and I got it, So I thought, oh, goodness, this is going to be interesting.
So what does that mean when you lead the secondary reform? What does that?
Well, you came in, you had people you reported to in that, but basically you were setting out the parameters for new courses, new ways that the students were going to be able to, even if they were, further down the rank, they were going to be able to have those opportunities and not be prohibited in any way.
Okay.
So, I did that sort of thing for a few years. And during that time, I got a Churchill Fellowship and I travelled overseas. So I was very interested, again, in children at risk and the way all the information systems would actually support young people at risk. So I wanted to be able to implement that when I came back to Australia. And then decided, oh, well, I can't do that while I'm just working curriculum. So then I did the thing again, and I ended up getting seconded for a year managing district services. And we set up a whole range of things, to start that and built on the work I'd done in my Churchill, to start to look at things around the school, police, justice services, all those sorts of things. And, it's just grown from there. And then involved in a lot of change, went back to my organisation, a lot of change. And from all that change and running IT, then I thought, God, I'm never going to run IT, but I ended up running IT.
Right.
And then my boss came to me one day and said, you should apply for the job to set up the national education curriculum. And I'm going, oh, really?
Right.
I thought, no, that would mean leaving WA. And anyway, I sort of forgot about it. And then one day I said, what, when you said I could do that, he said, go in there and write something and anyway, what happened was the next week they asked me to get to Canberra in a week. So my whole life just changed. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it was really great. Had an opportunity to set up the National Curriculum Board, and then the.
So what did that entail when you were setting that up?
Oh, that's like, let's call that big program management. Well,
okay.
I did when I got there. I mean, I thought there was going to be other people. Then I realised that no, I was there and I had to make it happen. Yeah. And that was really interesting. So the person said to me, oh, you've got to set up a meeting with all the states and territories and Julia Gillard in a fortnight. And I thought, oh, what have I got myself into? So it was a steep learning curve. Then managed to get the whole teams together. It had to be from states and territories. And did that for a few years. And traveled a bit around the East Coast. Yeah, was that
the first time you've ever done something on such a large scale? And how did you find that, especially trying to pull people together?
Well, there was a lot of that when I was leading a senior secondary reform, because there's a lot of people who didn't want to see change. You always have that when people don't want to see change. So who wanted a national curriculum when we've got a federated, state system? Right. So I had to do a lot of engagement, road shows, getting people together, making sure that, all the states and territories had their say in everything that was happening.
How difficult is that? When everyone's trying to chime in, how do you manage that from a sort of a stakeholder perspective?
Oh, from a stakeholder perspective, they've all got to have their views, right. And it has to be represented through all the governance that was set up for that, and up to, the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. Right. So I think it's always, you need to listen to what people are saying to make sure. And when I say listen, I have this phrase, listen to the ground, really listen to what people are saying and collaborate with them. So that they know what's in it for them. They need to actually understand that I'm going to get something out of this. So why would I sign up for this? And I think that's the same, whether it's what I was doing, way, way back, or what I'm doing now. Right. It's still the same sort of thing, So, I did that for a few years and, set it all out, and then decided, well, I needed more life experience, because I thought, well, that's sort of getting to the top of the tree without sort of getting any further up the top of the tree.
Right.
And which is not something I aimed to. As I said, I was aiming for breadth. So I managed to do I'd started my own consultancy, and I started to I then can't remember what my title was then, but I was leading the education and training and strategy for the Building Professionals Board in New South Wales. And then while I was there, they asked me to lead the building reform. So that was from education across to building reform. Right. So there's a lot of concern about the quality of buildings, and registration, accreditation, qualifications. But because I had this program management experience, I was able to also, roll out all these other streams and do all the stakeholder work, which was right across New South Wales. A lot of, well, a lot of blokes
Right.
in that environment.
Was that difficult to maneuver through, especially going into sort of, I guess, a male-dominated area?
I always say, thank goodness I had 4 brothers.
Right.
So that was a very good learning journey for me, having 4 brothers and understanding what worked and what doesn't work in a very strong male environment.
Yeah.
I think I knew that it had to be what's in it for them. So that was one where I was really, really listening to the ground and setting things up, making sure that they would be able to see what they wanted to see as outcomes. And one of the biggest achievements, it might not sound big, but I'm always amazed that I was able to talk the States and Territories Federated System with New South Wales being the one that had to change to lift the residential building qualification to an AQF 6. Whereas, and I couldn't believe it when they agreed.
What does that mean, like an AQF 6? What does that all mean?
It's sort of like, when you go to TAFE and you do certificates and things like that. So if you're at degree level, it's AQF 7, but the AQF 5 was considered too low.
Right.
So they were trying to move up the qualifications because there was a real concern, as you would probably know, Melbourne and Sydney, with a lot of the buildings. It's ongoing.
Right.
Yeah. So, but while I was doing that, I was doing other contract work as well. I was doing project management for different, not-for-profits or associations, just pulling things together, little things together for them. And also I ran a big literacy contract across New South Wales and training for over 25 early childhood, centres. So that was huge amount of work to do in that time.
Right.
Then I decided to come to Melbourne because all my family were going to Melbourne. And from that, I ended up working in transport and basically managing engineers. So here's the girl back there who was, just teaching drama and English and all that sort of thing, and managing engineers and all the data that was coming across Australia from the heavy haulage trucks. I did that for a year, and after that, I'm sorry, I hope it's not sounding boring.
No, this is good. Because I want to find out, as you go through it, because a lot of people stay in one career their whole life, right? And they're so worried to sort of move out or even know how to move out. And because I knew that you had so many lives within your career, I wanted to find out, like you mentioned, all you did was sort of send a letter to see if you could get that role back in City Perth. How did you go about sort of, constantly changing and diversifying your actual career path?
Well, I mean, I felt that you only have one life. I know you can have lots of different things in career. And I thought, well, do I want to get to the end of my life and say I've just done this one thing? Not everyone's like that. And, you can be in jobs where it's pretty, and people talk to me about this, in one organisation I work where, it's almost like a golden handcuff because the conditions are so good to stay that they go, oh, I don't want to jump. But I'm not like that. So other people would probably think I'd taken too much of a risk sometimes, but again, it's like, well, this is my life. What do I actually, want to do there? But what I did want to do is get my family back because we're all over the place from all the jobs. So we all ended up back in Melbourne. And that's when I bought the business in Camberwell for all the pet store and the dog room, everything. And we started with all of that. And, then I had a vegetarian restaurant, more dog grooming, and I've still got a, dog grooming business, but I've always contracted, out doing program management. So, I had people in Office Works at one stage doing a whole lot of stuff in customer experience. And, I then left the transport job. You can sort of tell, you think, okay, I think I've done what I can here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I ended up back in education, but running the integrity reform program. So there was a whole lot of stuff there for integrity. I won't go into the details, but that was 37 projects. And that had a lot of people involved across all of, Victoria. So,
Right.
it had to be, on the ball with that one. That was just a year's contract. And from then I got rung up. And this is what's interesting when you just get rung up, like you make relationships like I have with you or others.
Yeah.
And say, oh, Rose, what do you think about this? And I'll go, oh, that's okay. So I fronted up at Ambulance Victoria and ran their biggest portfolio that they've ever done for performance improvements, $500 million portfolio of work.
Right.
And that was a very big job for 3 years.
Right.
So.
And that's where I met you, actually, at Ambulance Victoria. Yeah. Was that, sorry, continue.
No. I mean, it was a lot of work, and very, very different work, from data to setting up ambulance stations to, there are just so many, paramedic coordinator things in the country, in the regions, working with the Emergency Service Telecommunications Authority to try to improve all those links and services. So it was pretty full on for the whole of those 3 years.
Yeah, right. Sounds like. How did you manage to sort of pivot and change? What was the underlying thing that you were able to sort of change from teaching then into program management, or, how did you pivot like that?
That's a really interesting question. It sort of comes naturally, or you have decisions that are there and you're going, I do have a view, can you stay too long? Sometimes organisations say this is not for me. You might go, the value system doesn't totally align with yours.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go, what else is there that's out there? Definitely, there's a lot of thinking about that when you're, working.
Mm-hmm.
And always when I'm training, this is just a thing that I do with people, because often I'll get a lot of younger people in my team. I said, there's always one day you will find in your career someone asks you to do something and it doesn't align with your value system.
Right.
And you've got to make a decision. You have to make a decision at that point. Am I going to do it or am I not going to do it?
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, then, there are consequences for that.
Mm-hmm.
You could get sidelined. You might go, okay, well, all right, or I'll leave, or, people have these things they face every day. But because, we do face that working is also about survival and the next paycheck, sometimes you feel compromised. But I've always tried to say, well, as much as you can, stay true to your values, So, but I think most people face that. It doesn't matter what job they're in.
Yeah. How do you deal with something like that, where you feel that it may potentially compromise your values, and you're put in a position that you feel that, either it doesn't align with you, but on the other hand, you like you said, you can be sidelined, and your career then stops. How do people sort of maneuver through that?
Well, you have to make that decision about the values, so to speak, and then you go, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then that there could be consequences. So you might go, well, if I'm not going to do that, I will look at other ways that I'll still do what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not going to do something that is, to me, seems morally wrong, or, those sorts of things. And you reinvent yourself. So I believe that I have tried really hard to do things like that, like you might, you keep networking, you can do some courses if you want to do courses. You don't concentrate too much on, self-pity and all that type of thing. I always think my mother's voice in my head, dust yourself off, get up, and, don't worry about it. Just get on with it.
Yeah, which is, I think, is good, simple advice, but straight straight to it, right? You can't let things knock you back and just dwell on that, because that's going to do more damage than good.
Well, it is. And I mean, if you don't, to me, your own values are very important. So you just have to live with the decisions you make. So if you say no, well, okay. So I've done, some things may have happened, or it hasn't really happened. I do remember one occasion that, it did happen.
Yeah.
I just looked at another opportunity and took that, and off I went,
Yeah.
But you also have to create your own things. So that, like when I got the Churchill, there was no compunction for, that I had to come back and do anything with it. But I pulled people together and said, how about, what if we do this? I then went to university and said, oh, look, how about we go for an ARC grant to see if we can actually, make things happen here for kids at risk, So, and then it happened and we got it. And I thought, oh, great.
Right. And that's
again to that very first thing. Why don't we just do that,
Do it. I wanted to touch on that fact where you were like, sometimes you have to forge your own path. And I think a lot of people within their careers sometimes think that, opportunities should just sort of fall in their lap, because they're working or whatever. But I think the largest thing that I've also noticed is you actually have to take charge of your own career. You have to voice your opinions. You have to seek it out yourself. What advice would you give to people that, knowing that information where you have to forge your own career path and take opportunities by the hand? How do you go about doing that?
Okay, well, I'll take an example. It goes actually back to my teaching days when I was teaching 16, 17-year-olds. And there were many kids there that just said, no, I'm going to be, often it was lawyer, doctor, though, because this is what that whole expectation is.
Yeah.
And so they had a trajectory, and that's what they were going to be. And some of them, good luck to them if that's what they really wanted. But it's those outside expectations that play mind games.
So true.
With you. And you're going to say, but what if I didn't think like that? What if I took a different opportunity, and I guess you look out for the signals for those, so I mean it's just different for everybody. So I mean, this just stuff might just come in my head.
Yeah.
Well, what about if I do that? But I mean, I think you have to have the courage, to know that it's all okay, and you have the resilience to go, well, if I do this, it's not necessarily going to be easy, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I would always err on the side of caution to make sure that you're, safe, in terms of the, your security to be able to make that jump, or you've saved enough money so you can make that jump. But, people do that quite a bit. They just say, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm going to do something else. And what I have read out of some of the research, or that's happening now during the COVID, is that there's a lot of people that don't want to go back to work the way they used to work, So it will be interesting to see whether we all just fall back to how it was, or whether it's different. So look for different opportunities. And it's also volunteer. You can volunteer for things. I've done different things like that and taken on little, directorships with not-for-profits and that throughout my career. So, and that gives you a lot of learning, lots of learning.
Right.
And then things can come of that. Things can come of conversations. So always, I would say, network, if there's courses you can go on them, but make sure that you're going on them for the right reasons.
Yeah. You've touched on networking a few times. How important has that been to your career specifically, and how has it sort of helped you along the way?
Well, I'm not a networker that rocks up at, events or whatever, because I'm not really very good at that. I must say, I'm more of a, although I've gone and done things like if I'm asked to do a presentation and then I'll meet with people and, then, something will happen, then they'll ask me to do something else. Because I have done that a bit, because I sort of naturally a bit of a public speaker. So, it doesn't, that sort of thing doesn't worry me. I have this big thing that I do. And because I am a dog, I run a dog business.
Lover, yeah.
I actually use dog personalities for break down barriers in organisations.
Right.
And that's always been quite fascinating. Like if I said to you now, Shanka, what sort of dog are you? Would you be able to tell me?
I reckon I'm a Jack Russell.
You're a Jack Russell. So what I've done in organisations, people will talk about what sort of dog they are, right? But they don't really want to talk about what they're like. So I would have, like, say all these paramedics, I remember doing it there, and they would say, no, you're more like a Bernard.
Right.
No, you're definitely a border collie. And then so you can look at that as to talk about, well, how do you go about your work as a border collie? Not talking about yourself, but then you actually build this really good team spirit in that. Now, I don't know how I digressed to that, but
no, it's good. Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah.
That's the sort of thing, that I try to bring in, reality to, all the work that you do, particularly in program management, because you can say that it's all about scope, benefits, risks, time, all of that, and it's right, but it's in the end more about the relationships, the relationships you're building with people, and this comes back to the networking, will be what will get you to the end of the process. And this occurred to me, it was back in 2011, where I relied a lot on my networks when I was actually working at Akara to get the My School website over the line, by a certain date, because not everyone wanted to sign up to the My School website.
Right.
But, those relationships ended up becoming very, very important to get to the end result. And I think that is always the case in your work, that the relationships that you build with people will definitely deliver a better outcome. So that's sort of how I operate.
Okay. And for people that may not know what program delivery is or program management, what is that in a nutshell, essentially?
Well, that's a good point, because I think one of the things I was thinking about saying, about what you need to be a good program manager. And I did want to make sure I didn't forget something.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So, and looking back at myself, because like I said, I just fell into it. People just started asking me to do things, and in a way, I've done it since I was a kid, just start running things.
Yeah.
Have you been bossy or something? I don't know, not really, but just, hey, let's just get together and, do things. And then I just kept on being asked to, can you run this? Could you take this over because it's not working so well? And it just sort of happened. So alongside my Masters in Education and Masters in Public Administration, so I've got 2 Masters.
Right.
I am Scrum certified.
Right.
No, that was well funny when I say I'm Scrum certified. But look, what I think helps for being a good program manager is, I think being an all-rounder helps. If you're very narrow, because I have had people work in my teams and they're going, so they will talk about, am I Prince this or am I this?
Yes.
And I'm going to run a certain way. And I'm going, look, just let's think about what we've got to do here. But if they're so narrow and you've got to use, I've got to use this ProSci method, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that, that's fine. But if you are not going to work outside of that and look at it from an all-rounder perspective, then you might be in hot water because it may not always work. So I think being a bit of an all-rounder and being able to adapt, and that word they've been using in the last year, pivot here and
pivot, yeah.
actually is very much about program management. So I also think that if you're a good program manager, you have to have the confidence to run things. You really do have the confidence to run things. And also, as I said, take over things if they're not working.
Right.
And I think on the outset, understand that you're accountable. You are accountable for that final delivery that the organisation is seeking to deliver. As I mentioned before, good communication skills are really, really important. And you have to have a desire to actually build the relationships with people, not just, because as I said, that's how you're going to get the work done is going to be critical. And you're forever good communications as well, because you're forever running meetings. I've counted up how many video conferences. I'm well over 600 or something at the moment.
When you say communication skills, that gets thrown out a lot. What is it about communication skills, or what do you mean communication skills is so important? Is it the way that you talk? Is it the way that you write an email? What is it about communication skills that is so effective?
I think, what those things you've said are very important. Being personable to people is important. Not being dictatorial, because some program managers can be, well, I'm in charge here. This is how it's going to happen. I mean, I think that being polite and, and I still think, what's in it for them. So, but I think in all of that, in that communication, there has to be organization. So I think that you have to be a very organized person, or have organized structures around you to be effective. And because if you're not, all the competing priorities and the different interest groups would take over. So this comes back again then to the communication, because the communication is also about motivating stakeholders.
Right.
So you can figure out how important it is for any, whether it's building, transport, education, whatever it is, how are you going to motivate them? So, because a lot of them may not want this project anyway. I've been, most of the places I've been, there's always a group that doesn't want something to happen. It's either inside the organisation or it's outside the organisation that they don't want to see this happen. So I think, and the sort of points I wrote down before I came on, I thought, well, to be an effective leader, you've got the interpersonal skills. Being able to talk is important, not talk too much, because you've got to listen as well. Because if you're in charge of plotting out the strategy and managing a team of people, you have to be able to motivate everyone to execute, what it is that you are trying to do. So from strategy through to operations. I think having street cred is important. So, for example, I remember when I did work, I've been in building, transport and, the AMBOs. You've got to get the street cred. So even things about don't overdress.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
You've got to read what I call read the room.
Yeah.
You've got to be one of them, but you're still working for them.
Yes.
And I think that is really important to know. But at the same time as that, so that sounds very servile, you actually have to be able to command respect, because when you really do want something just to happen, well, you've just got to make it happen if it's going, to go on track. And in amongst all of that, it has to create a sense of community of the whole organisation, or those involved in the project of work. And I think, then you do need the technical skills. You need to know how to plan, monitor, and manage the overall program. But like I said before, listening to the ground, not just I'll write down what you say sort of stuff, is to me really, really important, and making sure that there's something that they think that's in it, that it's in it for them. Because I think if you can do that, then you're on the way, to success.
Now, you also mentioned that there's always a group within that program or project when you're trying to deliver it, whether it be inside or outside, that may not want that program of work to happen or that project to happen. How do you get people on side, and what are some skills that, when you're dealing with that type of barrier, how do you get those people on side effectively?
I think you've got to bring them together, sit down with a few of them, talk about why they're not liking what's going on.
Right.
And sometimes that can give you really, really good insight because they can actually have some very good opinions. It could be that what they are saying is very important. And if you can then say, oh, okay, that's what you're worried about. Well, how about we do it like this? And then they go, oh, okay, can I be involved in that? And I say, sure, you can. Right. So I'm very much one for, finding that out, finding out what the problems are, and then creating opportunities for, informal, feedback and that sort of thing, plus focus groups and, the usual work groups, focus groups, all that sort of stuff. But, that to me is pretty important. But if I were to say, and I think this was one of the questions we were going to look at, what's the hardest aspects of the role? And I really gave this a lot of thought. When I look at all of the work I've done, I believe that what hampers program management in organisations, and I hope this isn't going to sound too bad, but it's poor executive leadership. And less than effective program governance. So if you go in, you've got to do something and you can't do it because the leaders aren't really committed to it. If you don't have effective program governance, like a program control board or things like that would lend themselves to helping decisions get made, well, really you can be spinning wheels. So you've got to always be trying to figure out, okay, how do we get this back on the table, or these people to be interested? So I think that becomes very important. And the other thing I found working in a lot of organisations is they want a program to run independently of the divisional structures.
Right.
But they don't really.
Right.
So you start working in the program management like that you think that is intended, but then all the hierarchical structures unpick the work. Now, that was a real challenge to me, and I tried to work out then how to get around a lot of that. It does dampen things, but now I'm very attuned to working in matrix structures.
Right.
And I actually believe in the end, if you can get the right governance around it, it's the most effective way to deliver to operations, because you're with them and then you can just ease out when you don't need to be in project anymore. Okay. However, you've got to have really, really strong leadership, because you're coming in. You're not a person who's necessarily there for a long time. Right. And so you've got to build all that cred up, but you've got to have a framework in which to operate. And I think that's quite a lot of, thinking that may need to go on in some organisations.
Right. Okay. You touched on matrix structures. What does that mean for people that may not know what a matrix structure is?
Oh, well, it's sort of, so you might have, so if I take, I'll use the ambulance one, for example.
Yeah.
So you may have a comms division, you may have, all the rural paramedics out there, you have operating, and you might have IT, you've got all the different divisions, but your program is running across all of that.
Right.
So you're going to need people everywhere. So I used to have there at one stage, at the peak of the work I was doing, stand-ups, every second morning, I think it was. And we had people ringing in from everywhere. Plus I had about 9 or 10 in a room where we were directing traffic about what was going to happen on any given day. But to get that, you have to have really strong structures that everyone agrees with. And if you can do that, you get all the stuff happening and everyone's committed to it.
Okay. And touching on that point, what do you think are the major skills that someone needs to be an effective program manager or be able to deliver programs?
A good negotiator.
And negotiation in what, though?
To get them to agree that we're going to do the work like this. Because I had one, I'm trying to say this generically, so I'm not naming the organisation, but trying to set something up where people didn't really want it to happen, but to keep going, and someone saying to me, no, it's going to shut that down after a day. And I said, well, why don't we just give it another day? Just let's see how we go for another day. So it's a little bit like talking someone into it. Okay, got another day. Okay, what about another week? Right. So, and that's when someone's so negative about, but it's all been written down about what, is going to happen, but they don't want it to happen. So it is about working out, let's just see how it goes here, and then we'll look at some lessons learned from what we've done. And if you don't think it works after this amount of time, we'll alter it. I never said we'll stop it, we'll alter it. So, and sometimes you just need to push things along like that to make it all keep happening. That's what I found anyway.
Okay. Any other skills?
Oh, well, again, it comes back to what I was saying before, good organisation skills. One thing I have found, I've got an amazing person who works for me at the moment. Since I've been online, I find it really hard to facilitate a whole range of conferences and note everything down. We do the recordings, but I've got an amazing person who takes actions and all of that. So I think that's very important to have that level of organisation so you can recount back.
Right.
I don't know if you found that, but I just found trying to work out all the body language on screen and also then go, okay, what did you say?
Yeah. It's a different dynamic. Yes, so true.
It's a different dynamic, and I've got, really used to it now, but I just know that having that and being able to then, I know another really good skill, and I've done that in it goes back to communication, and I remember it I do it now, but I'm going to do it all the time, but I remember when it worked really well was in the work I was doing in New South Wales in building, and I had to do a whole lot of roaches, and they're going, it's not going to happen, and this and that. It was all this stuff about everything. And I made sure that I had people backing me all the way, because we were flying around everywhere to all the regions. At the end of every day, it was on the website. This is what we talked about. This is what you agreed to. And this is where we're going next. And it got a lot of cred because, it wasn't like you were just writing it down and putting it in a, cupboard.
Yeah.
That's what you said. And then they talk about it and then go, well, where to next? How are we going to build from going there to the next, bit of work? So I think that it's just being able to, I'll use that word again, pivot, to read the room and know what actually has to happen next and head things off at the pass. It's like sending the border collie out in the paddock and rounding up the sheep.
Right.
Sometimes it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
But and one of the nicest things someone apparently said to me, they said it was a really good compliment. She said, where's Rose? She's so good at herding cats. Oh, I need her here right now. When I go there, I'm going, well, I don't know what that means, but I'm thinking, well, it does come back to a lot of organisation, but being personable and listening to people and making them feel like they're a part of the whole, and it's so important what they're giving you to get the work done. It doesn't matter if it's a product, it's an IT product, or it's a social service, or it's a big, workforce outcome for the organisation. Everything matters, from the little thing you're doing here to bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? So
trying to bring people along the journey.
It is about bringing people along the journey. Yeah. And you have all different types of people, and you have different types of people who are in your team.
Right.
So, your team, people in your team can also sabotage things too, because they might have their own agendas. So you have to get the commitment, and that's why you do stand-ups, and you also make sure that, in Scrum terms, you have your retrospectives and everything, and you think about that and how we could have done something better. And I always make sure and tap into, well, how do you feel? I always, after a couple of weeks, go, what are you on a scale 1 to 5? How do you feel like you're only a 3 this week? And I try to be honest too. I say, oh my God, I'm only a 2.5.
Right.
And I talk about that, and then they will talk about why they're not a 2.5 or why they're a 4, and how they're looking forward to being a 4, so you talk about all this lingo. Okay. So what can I do to make you be a 4, and I feel quite seriously about that as a program manager, that the people who are working with me, I'm going, how can I help you get your work done? Because then they feel like, you're really on their side. I mean, you are anyway, but, and they're going to actually be supported in getting the outcomes, to achieve the end goals.
Yeah.
So I do try to do that as well.
That was a really interesting point where, everywhere you walk into, there's always going to be politics, especially if you're coming in as a contractor or an employee. You have to understand the lay of the land and types of the organisation that you're working in, especially working in a project where you can have people, who may want to sabotage that. How do you, number one, how do you read the room in terms of politics, and how do you manoeuvre in and out of politics as well?
Carefully.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, like a landmine. So true. Yes.
Well, you have to, like, one of the questions I think we had was, what happens when you first come? You need to observe. And I always, like when you first come in an organisation, there's a grace period. You can make a few mistakes.
Yeah.
But what I would do, and encourage people, being programmers, is just look at the lay of the land, find out where the power politics is, observe, and keep observing. Right. And be very careful, be polite. Don't sort of make alignments anywhere, because it doesn't matter what it is, you've still got to get the job done, So, and that I think becomes critical, in terms of understanding what the politics actually is. So, because it can actually be an inhibitor to actually progress the outcome of the actual project, I think that is pretty important. Like, think about people in New South Wales, they really wanted buildings to be actually safer. So who doesn't want buildings to be safer? Everyone, you would think. But depends on what I've got to do to make it
better. Right.
So, and so you have all these different things that actually happen, and, regulations that need to be in place, and people don't want them in place, and, everything like that.
There was one thing that you also mentioned where you were like, sometimes you just have to be tough and just tell them it needs to get done. We need to get it done. If a person is not inherently like that, or if someone is trying to build that skill, how do you go about doing that? Especially when that is not of someone's nature, but that sometimes you just need to put the foot down and say, hey, we need to get this done to get this across the line. How do you go about that?
It's tough, but you do have, that's what I meant about street cred. And you would have, like, what can happen, it's been in every single project I've ever been involved in, you have to change direction in the middle, or for some reason. Right. And your team may not want to, and so you got to either go, well, okay, what's the problem? What were you trying to do? Listen again. Right. But go, well, for this period of time now, this is the direction we're heading. I'm going to come back to you on that, but for now, we're going to put all our energy into getting to this point. So there's an agreement. That's what I'm calling about negotiation. Right. I'm negotiating with you that you'll come on board, you'll do what we need to actually happen right now, and I'll come back to you on that. So, I mean, rather than being dictatorial, remember I did have 4 brothers. Yeah. I wasn't going to get anything about 4 brothers. Right. And I would tie me up to the goalpost or something, right? Right.
Yeah, but sometimes you need that thick skin. You need to be able to have that thick skin to move forward, especially when you're having to deliver something. Yeah.
And that means reading the room again from you as the program manager. You got to go, you don't even realise you've got the skill, because people said to me recently, how do you know that? I'm going, well, I just know that we're going to need 2 weeks to do that, a certain thing. And so we're going to have to make sure we start everything next week now that all this has changed, because that's happened quite a lot in my current job with COVID, because we're trying to do a whole lot of trials in schools. So we haven't been able to do trials in schools. So the whole project has to reshape itself in a way, and you've just got to know, now, because there's something being rescheduled 3 times, that's going to have a downward impact. How do you know it's going to have a downward impact of 3 months, Rose? It's only been 5 weeks. 5 weeks or something. I go, well, it's going to be 3 months, because you've got to actually take into consideration December and January and Christmas and people's holidays and school terms, and there's all of these sorts of things that actually need to happen. So you have to know your stuff. And I remember when I went to Ambulance Victoria, and I had to go and do this presentation about, I don't even know what it was about, but I was using my dog. I used my dog theory as well. But I remember getting up there, and I thought I wanted to make a point about technical language, because I think it happens in every organisation. And particularly when I was there, I was going, my God, there's an acronym for absolutely everything. Like your sentence there would be like 3 or 4 different acronyms. And I thought, I'm going to learn these. So I made sure that so that's what you've got to do. You've got to make sure you learn the acronyms. But in this presentation, I thought, I'm going to put them all down. And I put them out on this little paper scroll, and it was just rolling down on the stage. I was just going, well, that's your language, you know. So we were actually talking about language and the importance of being able to explain what those terms mean. But, you know, you go into another organisation and they've got different acronyms or different language that you have to get your head around. So you have to do your homework. You have to know stuff, and you have to learn it really, really quickly to be successful.
Being able to, I guess, not only adapt, but submerge yourself within that particular organisation as well, and willing to learn.
You do. And that's the way you get cred. You start talking the talk like they talk the talk, you know, their lingo, and then you go, oh, she's got it. Oh, and you throw something back to the people that, you know, that they've been talking about, and they go, oh, right, she's not just, you know, here's the time schedule, whatever it is.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to wrap it up by saying what you love most about program delivery.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting now because I really love this sort of work, you know, and I was going, what else, where could I go next, you know, although I'm really loving what I'm doing now, because that's so important. That's major reform in education for Year 12 students. But when I thought about what I love about the program role the most, and it suits my personality because I'm a starter and I'm a finisher. All right. So I do sort of worries me when I don't finish something well. And I have to tell you this little story my mother told me when I was well, she was a lot older. Like, you know, I didn't know this as a kid. She was telling me this as an adult. She said, you know what the teacher told me about you when you were only 6? I said, oh, I don't know, Mum, what? She said the building would burn down and she would still be sitting there doing her work at her desk. I'm thinking that's a good thing, maybe. Yeah. But I do have problems sometimes like, oh, I need to finish that. I want to make sure I finish that. Right. So, but I love the start because I'm a synthesizer and a strategist. So so it's a good mix for program management. So I like to be able to do that. You know, I'm just not in the middle of the chain. So I think that is really important. And when you kick goals, like as a team or as an organisation, oh, wow, you know, what a buzz. That really is wonderful. I think that I am good at building relationships with people, you know, to achieve outcomes. So I love doing that because, as I said, I know that, you know, that's the way you're going to achieve the actual thing you're trying to do. I believe I try to choose things where I believe it's going to make a difference. And if you look at my trajectory, I've sort of done that mainly. I know when I took the transport job on, I thought, wow, this is going to be really tough, engineers and stuff like that. Yeah. But I learned heaps. I learned so much about, you know, different types of contractual arrangements and the engineers and the way all the roads worked. I thought, wow, what a wealth of information. So
can I jump in there? Where, especially when you've done a role where you may not know that profession quite well, or especially like with engineers or whatever, how do you stand up with confidence, be like, well, I know in myself how to run programs and deliver that, and this is what I'm going to do? And you may have people that be like, well, you don't know engineering. How can you tell me what to do? How do you still persevere through?
Charm.
Okay, and that's good. Yeah, okay.
A little bit of that, and the 4 brothers help because they're all
right.
Sorry, I have to ring my brothers later. Thank you. But I think that being on the same page and listening, because, you know, I remember having engineers, well, we don't do it like that. We've got to do it this way. And Rose, we need to do this step first and then this step. I used to have these lovely conversations. And I remember this one guy, actually wasn't an engineer. He said, oh, look, I've been looking at the plan and you know what? It's going to actually take 6 months to do what you're saying we've got to do in 3. And I said, oh, really? Well, let's work out how we're going to do them in 3. because that's what the government actually wants us to do. And while I respect, that you've done it, we're going to have to figure out, because they think in like minutes or whatever, that kind of stuff. And I'm going, my brain is going way out here. For people like that are methodical, I might drive them nuts. So I do try to, look at that and go, oh, look, I think I'll sit down with you and then we'll work this out together. So I always say what my weaknesses are, like that's definitely one. I've got to slow down sometimes. But I think it's just being, there's a human being on the other end of that that's really thought about this, has gone home or whatever, and has written up this wholly big thing about how long it's going to take. So you need to respect that. But it's also helpful to me because I can go, well, okay, maybe we won't take that long, and then I'll show them actually how we might, be able to cut corners or something like that.
Right.
So I think that making a difference is pretty important to me, in what I've done. And one of the most amazing things I think is when I can talk someone into doing something that they didn't want to do. So
right.
That's a really good place.
Especially if they don't believe that they can do it, right? Especially if they feel like, oh, well, I don't know if I can do it. But if you can give them the sort of motivation like you mentioned, that's awesome.
And that's a good point you've made, because I do in the latter, because I'm not in the beginning part of my career now. So, I do, and I love it when I'm working with younger people, because I want to be able to coach them through and give them confidence in a safe environment. So at the moment I'm working with someone, I'm going, you need a little bit more experience in change. So look, you're going to do it, but I'm going to guide you. I'm going to be, your guide on the side here. So, it's all good fun. I love it. Wake up every day. Love going to work. So what's my next adventure? That's
I know I'm going to put you on the spot here, but what would be your best career advice? And it could be anything.
Best career advice would be, don't make up your mind too soon about anything.
Right.
Think about it, weigh the pros, weigh the cons, in terms of what you want to do, but also, when you're progressing in doing work, think about what people are telling you, weigh it up. Is good bits, the bad bits, what's going to be good for the outcome, but apply that to yourself and believe in yourself, believe that you can do that you can walk away and try something different, but just believe in yourself. And when it doesn't work, do what my mum said, dust yourself off and get up and do it again.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Now, Rose, if people want to connect with you, I'm going to pop your details down below, but you have been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Shankar. I'd love to help you in any way I can.
No, thank you.